Welcome to the ParentNet podcast by Focus on the Family Singapore. In each episode, we'll be speaking with everyday parents and practitioners as they share with us gems from their parenthood journey. Keep tuning in to learn with us as we figure it out together.
Hello and welcome to the ParentNet podcast. My name is June and I'm your host for this episode. Now I'm really excited today as we'll be tackling the question that has many new parents pacing the floor at all hours. The question is, should I sleep train my baby? So buckle up because we are diving headfirst into the world of the Z's, everybody's favorite letter. If you are a new parent or even a sleep-deprived second parent, go grab your coffee and tea because you really don't want to miss this episode. I've got SG Supernanny, Miss Zoe Chu, on the show today. Zoe is a renowned international speaker, author, and baby and adult sleep expert who has a mission to empower tired and sleep-deprived adults and children to get back their precious sleep. She is one of Yahoo Top 20 Marvelous Women in Singapore in 2021, and her world chose her as one of the top 8 TikTok accounts to follow. And she's going to share her expert tips on how to get your little one to sleep through the night. So welcome, Zoe, and thank you for joining us today. Would you like to start by introducing yourself to our audience and maybe tell us a bit about how you got started on this journey?
Hi everyone. Hi June. Thanks for having me today. So my name is Zoe Chu. I'm also the founder of Sleep Supernanny, and I'm a mother of 4, including a set of twins. So how I got into this sleep business is really kind of unexpected because 18 years ago, when I was a first-time mom to my twins, I struggled with sleep deprivation. If you can imagine the sleep deprivation with just one baby, looking after one baby, imagine me having 2 babies.
Yeah, times 2, right?
Yeah, it was really tough. And so back then I was living in New Zealand. When I found out that I was expecting twins, I was really excited and anxious at the same time. So I read a lot of books about pregnancy, what to expect when you're expecting and everything. And I even attended antenatal classes with my husband. But really nothing prepared me for this sleep deprivation because they don't actually talk about sleep training or how to actually get baby to sleep during all this antenatal class or even in the books that I was reading. So when I brought my twins home from the hospital, I was really anxious because I didn't know what to expect. So I just tried to do the best I could given the information I had. And also my mom-in-law was also there to help us out, to help us with the confinement. But I tried to handle as much as I can with the feeding, with the sleeping. And I remember, there were so many nights. One twin would wake up at 2 a.m. and then the other twin would wake up at 4 a.m.
Oh my God.
Yes. And I would be like jumping out a bit, trying to settle one baby, hoping that the other baby won't wake up. And this would go on for weeks and months. And I was really exhausted. And I tried to handle everything on my own because, my husband, he has to go to work the next day. And, I don't think anyone wants to go see a tired and sleepy dentist. So that's why I took it all upon myself to do all the night duties. But I was really exhausted. I didn't know what else to do. I thought this is what I signed up for as a mom. And I should be really grateful that I have 2 healthy, cute-looking babies. So I just continued to soldier on until one fine day, my lovely neighbor, thank God for her, she came to visit me and she probably saw my panda-looking eyes and she started talking about sleep training. At that time when she talked about it, I have no idea what she was talking about because I've never heard of sleep training. And then she told me, Zoe, you need to have a routine because without a routine, your life will be a mess. And I was like, you know what? She's right. I mean, I look at her, she was a very happy, well-rested mommy of 2. And I look at myself, I was a tired, grumpy mommy of 2. And so I was like, okay, naturally I was convinced and I listened to her. And I remember she gave me this book, I think it's called Baby Wise. That book was really, to me, life-changing because it helped me to understand more about routine. And it talks about how our babies are like a welcome addition to our family. And our life should not revolve around the baby, but the baby should revolve around our lives. That to me was another thing that was like a wake-up call for me because I think our lives revolve around our babies at that time. And that's why it was like upside down. And so after I learned more about routine and I started implementing sleep training on my twins, my whole world just changed for the better. And, I could just put my twins down into the cot. I no longer need to rock them to sleep. I don't have to pat them to sleep. And I just put them down in the cot after I, sing lullabies and pray with them and just put them down and I kiss them goodnight. And I can just leave the room and they can just fall asleep on their own independently. I was like, wow, so amazing, right?
Priceless.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And then other tired families, like me, my friends, they were so amazed because they was like, how did you manage to get your twins to sleep so well? Because they started at 6 months old, they started to sleep through 11 to 12 hours through the night. And so they were so amazed. And then I started sharing with them what I know as well about sleep training. And yeah, they also start to see improvements in their baby sleep. But at that time, I didn't see it as a career because I was still in the accounting industry.
Thank you for bringing us through this like beautiful and also somewhat magical journey, right, that you just described. And, when I was listening to you, how tired, the panda eyes, I was actually transported back to when I had my first child. This was 15 years ago. She's 15 now. And I remember how she would sort of breastfeed to sleep. I had to breastfeed her to sleep. And it became a habit. And, every time she woke up from her sleep, then she would look for me. You can imagine how tiring that was. And yeah, I wish I knew you at that time. But yeah, maybe you could help some of our listeners here who are kind of in this boat, right? Where they are dealing with a newborn and also trying to set some routines. I picked that up as a keyword, right? That you mentioned earlier. Could you bring us through how this process of sleep training looks like? How does it work?
To me, sleep training is essentially fostering healthy sleep habits for your children. It's about teaching your baby the invaluable skill of how they can fall asleep independently. Just like when it comes to feeding, when it comes to walking, they are going to learn it on their own, right? Eventually. So for me, a lot of times parents think that when it comes to sleep, it's something that they feel like it's their job to help the baby fall asleep. But if you think about it, all of us, when we fall asleep, do we actually need someone to help us? No. So this is a skill that we need to actually foster for our children from young so that we set them up with the right foundation. I personally realize that if you have a good foundation for them, especially when it comes to teaching them how to fall asleep independently and staying asleep independently on their own, then you have set them up for life. Because I cannot begin to tell you how many times that I've talked to adults, because I'm also an adult sleep expert, and they will tell me that they suffer from insomnia. And whenever I ask them, do you have trouble sleeping when you were a child? And then they'll say, how did you know? So that's why I feel that if they have not learned this skill from young, it can translate into adult sleep problems later on.
That really got my attention because sometimes I do struggle to fall asleep, and perhaps it is due to some late night work that I had to do, or just checking phone messages, or maybe I had just received some information that I felt I needed to digest. So it like kind of disrupts that cycle because actually I'm feeling tired, right? But then you kind of get distracted and your brain starts to go buzzing, I'm not sure if I actually had difficulties falling asleep as a child. I think that part about giving them the habits that would last them for life makes a lot of sense. I cannot imagine any parent who would actually say, no, I don't really want this for my child. Understanding that it is then helpful for the child himself or herself to learn this skill, how do we go about it? Is there like a good age to start? For example, would you say the minute you bring your newborn home, you can start to inculcate some of these habits? Or is there like a good milestone?
I would say that most parents, they would think that the best time to sleep train is from 4 to 6 months or onwards. But personally, with my number 4, I foster healthy sleep habits for her from day one, from the moment I brought her home from the hospital. And to me, it was the best thing ever. Because like I told you, if you set them up from the very beginning, the foundation becomes stronger and it's easier to mold them. So I always say this to my clients, like think of your newborn, it's like a blank canvas. So you can paint the right picture from the very beginning. But if you have already painted not quite the right strokes, and when you try to undo it, it's a bit harder, right? So the earlier you start, the better it is for you to mold your baby sleeping patterns. Yeah.
Okay, so start early and don't be afraid to go from day one, in a sense.
Yes,
That's what you're
and
saying.
for newborn, it's better to start early, like I said, because it's easier to mold and you can still kind of go with the flow. You don't have to be too rigid yet. If you start only at 4 months onwards, then it's already the first 3 months.
Habits are already there,
habits
right?
already formed. And so I'm not saying it's too late. I'm just saying that it's a bit harder. Not impossible, but it's a bit harder. So that's why when I realized the difference when I foster healthy sleep habits for my number 4 from day 1, it was so much easier. I didn't get too much of a resistance and, protest and all this because from day 1, she already know that this is the routine and this is how it is. As soon as I put her down, she doesn't get overtired. I mean, when I put her down before she's overtired, and she knows that it's time for her to drift off to sleep. It's like the routine has already been set in motion and in place, and she know what to expect. I think that's the beauty when you actually foster healthy sleep habits as early as possible.
I hear you mentioning this healthy sleep habits. Could you give us a sense of, what these actually look like? For example, does it mean having set nap times and waking them up from their late nap by a particular hour so that, there's a bit of a gap from when their ideal bedtime is meant to be? Could you give us a sense of that?
So my approach, right, is centered around my 5-step Sleep Baby Sleep system. It's a holistic strategy tailored to each family's unique needs, taking into account the baby's age, their developmental stage, their family dynamics, and also the personality and temperament of the child. So it's really about creating a balanced routine that nurtures both the baby's and parents' well-being. So there's no one size that fits all. But having said that, this 5-step system can be applied to all families, and I can share with you exactly what are the 5 steps, okay? So step number 1 is really to understand the science of sleep. So when you understand the science of sleep, you can explain, predict, and control your child's sleeping situation. For example, if you know about the sleep cycles, okay, you will know that your baby's sleep cycle typically is about 30 to 45 minutes. And when your baby just finished one sleep cycle, you do not assume that your baby's nap time is over because they actually still need to connect to the next sleep cycle to have a good solid nap. So typically a good solid nap for say a 6-month-old baby is about 1.5 to 2 hours. But I know a lot of parents who think that after the baby wake up from one sleep cycle, about 45 minutes, they think that nap time is over.
Done.
And then they want to start feeding the baby because the baby is crying. But the baby is crying because the baby still needs to connect to the next sleep cycle. So that's why understanding the science of sleep is so, so important. And then number 2 is to establish a good sleep environment for your child. So creating a dark, cozy sleep environment, making sure that the child knows that, okay, this is where I'm going to sleep, and make sure that the sleep environment is consistent as well. Make sure that the cot is where the baby sleeps. And the cot is not where you put your baby there just to, just in case you want to go to the toilet and things like that, because you're going to confuse your baby. So as soon as you put your baby into the cot, that means it's telling your baby that it's time for him or for her to sleep. I know cot is a very safe space, but do not confuse your baby. And then the third thing is to have a age-appropriate routine for your little one. What I mean by this, it means to have a good schedule. So a good schedule, if you can remember, is called EASY. Okay, it's very easy to remember.
Nice.
E stands for eat, A stands for activity, S stands for sleep, and then when your baby is sleeping is your time. Easy to remember?
Very easy.
Yes.
I'll remember that.
And so to have that sort of routine will allow your baby to know what to expect when they wake up from their nap or from their sleep. They know it's time for a feed, and then it's playtime. And then once they have enough playtime, then it's time to sleep. And it's important to also remember to put your baby down before they get too overtired. So the wake window of a baby is also very important depending on their age. Like for a newborn, their wake window is only like maybe 45 minutes up to 1 hour. Like for a 4-month-old baby to 6-month-old baby, their wake window is between 1.5 to 2 hours. So you have to really look at what is appropriate for your child. But of course, if you're not looking at the clock, then you can look at your baby's sleepy cues, which are more accurate. Well, what are the sleepy cues? Could be they are rubbing their eyes, looking very dazed, and they are no longer making eye contact with you. All those are signs. Some of my clients will ask me, what about when they are yawning? Well, I always think that when they're yawning, it's a bit too late because they are already overtired.
Right. So you may have actually missed that
Sleep window.
Yes. When they first make that yawn.
Exactly.
Wow.
And when they start yawning, and then by the time they start to fuss and cry, you try to get them to sleep, they're gonna cry even more. Do you know why? Because they have so much cortisol in their system. So crying is actually a way for them to get rid of the cortisol buildup. That's why, for us, when we are stressed,
Yes.
we cry, right?
Yes.
Overwhelmed. And then after we cry, do you feel better?
Yes.
Yes. So that is sometimes what happens for our little one as well. Because I know a lot of parents out there, they are very fearful of the crying. We got to get them into a routine so that we understand why are they crying. And so the fourth step is to have a sleep plan. Because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And finally, step 5 is to teach your baby the art of self-settling. Okay, so like I mentioned just now, it's important to let them have this skill of self-settling so that they know that they can fall asleep without any sleep props. So I know a lot of parents, I have personally introduced to my twins as well. I thought it's my job to help them fall asleep. I thought, I give them pacifier, I will rock them to sleep, I will pet them to sleep, thinking that, this is how I can get them to fall asleep. But really, it's not our job to help them fall asleep. Our job as parents is to making sure that we have all these 5 steps so that they know when we put all the pieces of the puzzle together, when we put them down into the cot before they get overtired, they know it's their job to drift off to sleep on their own.
And during this process, I'm sure you've had parents come to you and say like, my baby's crying, should I pick him up? And what if this scars him for life, and those kinds of questions. So I'm just wondering, would you be able to address this with our listeners? Because I'm sure they are asking the same.
So there are so many studies that actually talk about the benefits of sleep training and how it does not affect the child's development, attachment to the parents if they do sleep training. Even the cry it out, which is most parents, they are very fearful of this cry it out. Now, cry it out means that you're just going to leave your baby in the cot and then you're just going to walk away and you don't check your child until the next morning. If you're not comfortable with that, do not do that. I don't encourage that as well if you're not comfortable with that. So for me, what I teach our parents is this. I'll teach them to do the leave and check, which is also another way, is called controlled crying, where you can actually check on your baby every few minutes. It's to really assure your baby that you're right there and that you're just going in to tell your baby that mommy is here, it's time to sleep. You use the keywords, let them know. Because if your child has already been having all the sleep props, they have always been rocked or nursed to sleep all this while, and then suddenly when you do this sleep training, they are not going to understand what you're trying to tell them to do.
It's going to be a shock to their system, right?
So they will start to protest, which is very normal and is expected. But the thing is, when you do this controlled crying, this leave and check method, you can go in and check on your baby to assure your baby, to calm them down. And then you can wait until they're calm, or you can just assure them for a few minutes and then you leave again. Okay, so keep doing that and you keep repeating this whole process until they fall asleep. Trust me, they will fall asleep. I know it seems like impossible at that time when you're going through it, but they will fall asleep eventually. But of course, remember, you have to put all the pieces of the puzzle correctly.
You cannot just go in and do one thing and then neglect the rest, right?
Exactly.
Like you said, the sleepy cues, the being mindful of the time for in an age-appropriate way.
Yeah. there's another self-settling method which we also encourage parents to do is stay in a room where you can stay in the room with the child until they fall asleep. There are some parents who feel like if I leave the room, they feel like the child may feel abandoned.
Okay.
So if you don't want to, yeah, you can stay with your child. But the thing is, you have to focus on the fact that, hey, it's still a win as well. Because if all this while you've been nursing your baby to sleep, then at least now you just let your baby be in the cot and fall asleep on their own without you nursing them. And then you're just by their side and encouraging them and just being their cheerleader. So a good analogy that I like to use is that when you teach your child to ride a bike, you will have to learn to let go,
Let
right?
go, yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably the hardest thing for many of us.
Yeah. But just because your child fall down and protest, does that mean you say, oh, it's okay, you don't have to learn anymore? But we will continue to encourage them.
Because
So-
we recognize that it's a good skill for them.
Exactly. So same thing when it comes to sleep training and teaching them how to fall asleep independently. I know it's tough at the beginning, right?
Yes.
But I think perseverance and consistency, that's the key.
Would you say there is also like a maximum amount of time that you would allow, for example, this crying to continue? And is it wise to like just call it quits for today and just help the baby just get to sleep? Maybe there are other circumstances,
Yes,
you know?
of course. I mean, that's why if you feel like this is not the right time, maybe the child is super duper overtired. You know, maybe the naps have been horrible. You just feel like the child has been crying for, you know, more than your comfortable duration. So by all means, you can rescue your baby and then try again the next day. Just don't give up.
So have the aim, the goal in mind, you know, even as we do this, and give ourselves some breathing space, I guess, you know, what is what I'm hearing. Give ourselves room to, okay, maybe today is not a good day, but we can always try, pick it up another day.
And I also want to address that a lot of times when parents are fearful of the crying, it could also stem from their own mindset about crying. It could be their upbringing, right?
Yeah.
Could be that to them crying is something that is a no-no, it's taboo. We really got to understand why are they so fearful about the crying. What I'm trying to say is not all cries have to be responded to right away. Okay, especially when we know the child is protesting. So for example, when your child wants to play with fire next time, just because they cry and protest, does that mean we give in to what they want? So that's why we have to have a routine in place so that we understand why the child is crying. And when we understand why they're crying, then we can respond to their cries accordingly.
And I kind of understand why there is this 5-step process because it really starts from step 1, looking at all the healthy habits, the routines that you can set in place before you even get to that allowing baby to cry for in that controlled manner, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Zoe. I think it kind of gives us a really good picture. I'm just wondering whether it's a mom or a dad listening out there and they are trying to prepare themselves for this sleep training process. Is there 1 or 2 things that you would suggest for them to do?
So preparation is key. Start by establishing a consistent routine, like I mentioned just now, and the 5-step system. Also mentally prepare themselves for the process because it's important to have support from the family, perhaps through their support group or even consulting a sleep expert. Also ensure to communicate and involve all caregivers in the process for consistency so that everyone is on the same page.
I would imagine sometimes that could be quite difficult, especially if you have grandparents also coming in to help, right? Because for them, it's like, you know, the heart, it feels so painful when you hear the crying, right? Yeah.
So I always tell my clients this, the implementation is really the hardest, but once the implementation is over, to maintain the whole process is so much easier. So for the grandparents who may not be able to go through this implementation, so I would suggest for the parents to do it. And then once they get their baby to self-settle and they understand this whole routine, then all they need to do is for the grandparents to just maintain it, because the grandparents can just put the baby down and they can just fall asleep on their own.
for all,
It
right?
is a win-win. That's why so many of my clients, they will tell me that, wow, their moms are like now advocating for sleep training, you know? Yeah, because sometimes they have to see it to believe it, right? Yeah, because if we tell them, they may not believe it. And so, yeah.
Is there a typical number of weeks before we see success or progress in this case?
I would say typically for babies 4 months and above or 6 months and above, for the night sleep, they will probably see results within 1 week or so. For the naps, it may take about 2 to 4 weeks or even longer, depending on the approach that the family uses, and also the temperament and personality of the child.
I can attest to that because, yeah. I mean, you have 4 children, I have 3, and they're all different.
Yes.
I'm really grateful, Zoe, to have you today. I think you've shared many practical tips and a lot of insights on this slightly mysterious and unknown topic, for many of our new parents out there. It's with sadness that I have to wrap up today's episode, but do you have any parting words that you'd like to really leave with our listeners?
Well, I hope that everyone will foster healthy sleep habits for their little one, because to me, it is the best thing ever. I wouldn't dare to have so many children if I didn't sleep train them in the very beginning. To me, sleep is the foundation of our health and our well-being, and it's really life-changing. And I hope more parents out there who have been struggling with sleep deprivation for the longest time, they will consider sleep training and explore more and find out more. There's no harm trying. And I really hope that everyone who listens will remember to live, love, laugh, and sleep well, because only with good sleep, you can have it all. And remember to connect with me at Sleep Supernanny on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. I'm there as well.
Definitely. And I think we've kind of got maybe one of the answers, right, to helping our nation lift our total fertility rate and to encourage more parents to have more children. So thank you once again, Zoe. For listeners out there, we trust that you have benefited from today. If you'd like to find out more about Zoe's work, as she mentioned, you can check her out at SG Supernanny on Instagram. And she's actually got a book out as well. It's called Sleep Baby Sleep, and you can check it out at major bookstores or even go straight to her website, that is sleepsupernanny.com. So do also share this podcast with a friend or a new parent who will definitely benefit from all the tips that's been shared today. And for more parenting resources, do visit our website at family.org.sg. We hope you keep tuning in to learn and grow in your parenting journey. Until the next episode, have a great week ahead.